Your first creation will be your home space. But before that, I need to teach you the basics of moving around. My imp can help you with that. It's got some quests for you. Go over and say hello. Aha! That's a quest. Complete the first batch of Imp Quests to begin your dream-shaping journey. Finishing them will earn you your very own home space. Onwards with the first quest. You need to know how to look around, so let's start there. Wonderful! Now let's see about moving around. Sometimes you'll want to move while looking in one direction, otherwise known as strafing. Sometimes you'll want to move while looking in one direction, otherwise known as strafing. Great job! Now to get up close and personal with objects, you can use Grab Cam Zoom. Time to give GrabCam Pivot a whirl. This helps you examine things from all angles. Whoa! Let's really go places. To move across the scene very quickly, you need to know how to zip. Dreamer, it is with great pleasure I now bestow upon you your very own home space. When you're ready, head through the magic door. Welcome to your home space, your personal corner of the Dreamiverse, which you can transform in any way you please. Other dreamers can visit your home space to take a peek into your imagination and what makes you tick. It looks a little bare, doesn't it? Let's make it more you. Visit my imp to get started. Aha! A new batch of Imp Quests. Completing these will give you tools to edit your home space and win you prizes you can use to decorate it. Most excitingly of all, finishing them will earn you access to DreamShaping in the main menu. Okay, Dreamer, let's get started. How can we use this block to get that prize bubble? Bravo! And now there's a prize higher up. How are we going to get the puppet up there? Perfect. And there's another prize, right where the block was before we moved it. If only there was some way to undo the change we made. Good work. There's another prize bubble for you. This one is higher up. If we could rotate that block, it would make a good ramp. What? The next prize bubble is even higher up. Maybe we can make the ramp bigger to reach it. Or scale it up, as we say in DreamShaping. Now, let's discover the secrets of one of the most useful tools in the whole Dreamiverse. Clone. By cloning objects, you can quickly build up large creations and fill your home space for less cost. Now, let's make some room. so we can build with all the lovely prizes you've won. Now, let's dive into the Dreamiverse and transform this space with the treasure from your quests. Look at all the wonderful things you found. There's lots more where these came from. And look at the things the folks at Media Molecule left for you in MM stuff. Ooh, that looks fancy. Where's nice for it to go? This is where you'll find all the finely crafted, fabulous creations by Media Molecule, the creators of dreams. Well done, Dreamer. DreamShaping is now yours to explore. Simply head to the main menu. This is DreamShaping. Here you have the power to manifest anything you can imagine. Anything. Music, a story, a piece of art, a whole game, even something there isn't a word for yet. Create things from scratch, or remix something another dreamer has made using the Dream tools. Since you're new, I'd recommend heading to the Dreams Workshop, where my friends, the Dream Crafters, will introduce you to the secrets of creation. Welcome to the DreamShaping menu. Here you can create something brand new, browse for something to remix, or learn some techniques in the Dreams Workshop. So, you want to learn the ropes of dream shaping, but you don't know where the tools are on the shelf, or how to use that intriguing gadget. Or you want to know what that strange contraption over there does. Dream Crafters, assist us. Hello, architect. Hello, engineer.
Hello, Queenie.
Why are we squirrels?
Just a temporary physical form for you. I like it. It's cute.
Well, thank you. It's better than the last one.
Yeah, at least there are no tentacles this time.
Now, show this dream shaper how to unleash their creative powers.
Done! Follow me, Dreamer. Oh, it's so exciting that you're here. I have been really looking forward to this.
There's so much to show you. Gameplay, animation, art.
There's no limit to what's possible.
Welcome to the Dreams Workshop. Have a browse of the tutorials, masterclasses, and how-to videos we've got here. If you're new to dream shaping, maybe try the Start Dreaming tutorials first. They'll get you up to speed with all the basics of dream shaping.
I hope you've got your imp under control. I've got some spectacular tricks to show you, and some that are just all right. In this tutorial, you'll master the basic controls you learned in the home space. But this time, you'll have the full freedom of edit mode. Use the video player to play through the tutorial steps. Follow the steps carefully. It's not just about getting to the end, it's the journey that counts. So here we are. This is where the magic happens. Edit mode. The row of buttons you can see is the assembly menu. That's where you'll find all the tools and modes you need to construct your scenes. It can be opened and closed by pressing the square button. You won't need it just yet, so go ahead and close it with square. Somewhere in this scene I've hidden a puppet, which we'll need in later tutorials. I've left some clues to help you find it. Use the camera controls you learned in the home space to investigate the island. Here's a quick reminder. Move around the island using the left stick. Push it left and right to move sideways, and up and down to move forwards and backwards. Use the right stick to look around the scene. To move up and down in the scene, just hold L1, then push the left stick up and down. Use the left and right sticks to look around the island. If you go flying off in the wrong direction and lose your bearings, don't worry. Just hover over the mode icon in the corner of the screen. In assembly mode, the icon is a puzzle piece. Here you'll find a camera bookmark that'll take you back to where you started in the scene. Select it with X and you'll be back in familiar territory. Can you find anything here that looks like a clue? Once you've found the clue, you're ready to move on to the next step. Press the arrow button on the video to continue. Did you find that clue? It was on the back of one of those shapes. Think back to the first clue. The cone was on... Now, that looks pretty good, at least from this angle. Creating scenes in three-dimensional space means that you should always look at your creations from different angles. The easiest way to do that is with the grab cam. Instead of moving the objects you grab cam moves your point of view around them. Try it out on the cone. Hover over it, then press and hold R1. Pushing the left and right sticks moves your point of view around the cone. Easy! Now that you can get a proper look at it, check that the cone is on straight. Unlike mine. Hey, look at that! Another clue. It's a molecule. I know because I put it there. Just play along with... Did you find the next clue? It was on the back of the orange cube. What on earth could it mean? If I had eyes, I would wink at you right now. I can't see any other green trash cans around. Unless... Of course, the trash can is the icon for the delete tool. I'm so devious. That must mean you need to delete the orange cube. Here's a reminder of how to delete things in edit mode. Hover your imp over the cube, then press the triangle button. That was my final clue telling you where to... Right, here's the puppet I reserved for you. Let's call her Connie, because she looks like a cone. We need to help Connie walk through the door to complete this tutorial. To do that, we're going to have to switch over to play mode. Remember, right now you're in edit mode. This is where you create and edit your scenes. In play mode, you can experience the scene just like a player would if they found it in the Dreamiverse. You can't make any changes in play mode, but you can take control of characters and try out what you've made. Switch over to play mode now. Just press the options button on your controller. Hover over the controller icon with your imp, then press X to select it. To control a puppet in a scene, you first need to possess it with R2. Try that now. She's full of beans, isn't she? I picked her just for you. Walk her around a bit, then take her through the door to finish this tutorial. Oh, looks like the door's too high. There's more to Connie than meets the eye, though. She might be able to reach it if you make her jump by pressing X. Oops. I remember now. I always forget to put the steps in. Better head back into edit mode. To switch back to edit mode, just press Options again, then select the pencil icon. Did you see those stairs on the island below us? Those might come in handy now, so strafe down to them with L1 and the left stick. If you've deleted the stairs, you can use Undo by pressing the left directional button. Just keep pressing it until the stairs come back. Now you've got the hang of moving things around in edit mode, it's time to master manipulating objects. Just as well, because Connie's friend Cuthbert fell asleep in the Dreamiverse and got stranded. Yes, he's a cube with legs. Connie didn't choose her friends. I did. So, we need to fix these platforms if she's going to reach the flag and get to Cuthbert. Before we start, you can switch to play mode to see how a player would experience this scene. You'll always need to test things out in play mode while DreamShaping, so it's a good habit to get into. Press the Options button, then select Play Mode with X. Its icon looks like a controller. Once you're in play mode, take control of Connie with R2, and we have to do something about these platforms if Connie's going to reach the other side. First, let's get a good look at them. Move your view side on to Connie and the first pink platform. Don't forget, you can hold L1 while using the left stick to strafe up and down. Now, hurrah! Connie and Cuthbert have been reunited. But now they need to find a way out before Cuthbert falls asleep again. So let's learn how to find a door in the Dreamiverse. Go to the Assembly menu, which is the row of buttons at the top of the screen. The Assembly menu disappears when you're busy working on a scene, to make sure it doesn't get in the way. So if you can't see it, Just press square to open it. Here you'll find all the assembly tools, modes, and gadgets. If you ever wonder what a button does, just hover over it for a few seconds to see more info. This menu is also where the search button lives. It's the one with the magnifying glass. Select it now with X. The search button takes you to the Dreamiverse, where you'll find all the things created by dreamers from around the world. But for this tutorial, I've made a collection of elements for you to use in this scene. Let's see if we can find a door in the Start Dreaming collection. Select it with X. Have a look around. What elements do we have here in the collection? Ah, there it is, a door. Select it with X now. You should know this isn't just any door, it's a very special one. It has some animation and logic built into it, so it will magically open when Connie goes near it. Now that it's on your Imp, you can scale it with the up and down directional buttons, or rotate it with L2 or the touchpad. Now you know how to grab, rotate, and scale objects, it's time I showed you how to clone things. Cuthbert has managed to get himself stuck again. Luckily, I've set up this scene so that we can use the clone tool to rescue him. With this tool, you can make exact copies of anything in the scene. This makes it one of the most useful tools in a DreamShaper's toolbox. You'll also get a chance to practice with all the other tools that you've learned so far. If we get Connie off this platform, maybe she'll help us out. Let's use the clone tool on this one small block to create a bridge. Remember how we used the L1 button to modify how the grab cam and the left stick work? Well, it can also change how the grab button works. Hover over the floating block with your Imp and hold L1. Now grab the block with R2, and remember that if you press it gently, you can move it more slowly. Now you have another block. That's because grabbing things while holding L1 creates a clone of that object. Once you've created the clone, you can release L1, but don't let go of R2 until you're ready to place it in the scene. When you've found the right spot, release R2 to put it. Now you know how to grab. Let's get back. Okay, Connie, we've almost made it to the door. Ah, but she needs to go across and up now. Good thing you already know how to make clones because we're gonna need them. So hold L1 and grab the block with R2 to clone it. Now place that clone a little higher than the original, and you know what? There's a better way, so let's undo that with the left directional button. We're going to try a new technique called repeat cloning. I bet you can already guess what it does. That's right, it lets you make lots of clones at once. Let's give it a go. Hover over the block again, hold L1 and press and hold R2. Release L1 once you've made the clone, and move the block up and along. Don't put it down yet though. This is where you become a cloning expert. Without letting go of the first clone, press the right directional button to create a second one. And, you guessed it, another press will create a third one. In fact, you can just keep pressing right to create more and more clones in a sequence. And if you make too many, no problem. Just press the left directional button to remove any clones you don't want. As you can see, all the clones are spaced evenly, and you can move the whole sequence by simply moving the clone that's on your imp. If you move the clone up, you can create a staircase. As always, put it down by releasing R2. Once the clones are in place, they won't be in a sequence anymore. You'll have to edit each block individually. See the dotted line around them? That's a selection. When you put repeat clones down, they're always selected Let's get back to the staircase. It's looking pretty good, but I have one more thing to show you before you move on. Let's get rid of all the clones we've made by pressing the left directional button a few times. You'll notice all the repeated clones are undone together. Now hover over the first block, hold L1, then grab it to create a new clone. Remember to release L1 once you've made the clone, otherwise the next bit won't work. This time, move the block where you want the last step of the staircase to be. There, right in front of the door. Don't let go of R2 yet, though. Instead, press the left directional button and... look at that. You've created a sequence of clones between your imp and the original block. You can keep pressing left to create more steps or right to remove them. Once you're happy with your staircase, let go of R2 to place it in the scene. You can create incredible shapes with repeat cloning, so feel free to experiment. How you position the first clone will affect all the repeated clones. Rotating the clones, for example, will let you build ramps and spirals. And if you scale the clone with the up button, you can create a sequence that increases in size. So try different approaches and see what you can come up with. If the path is clear for Connie, switch over to play mode to test. Welcome to part 4 of our Start Dreaming tutorials. Ah, I see Cuthbert has managed to get himself in a pickle again. Connie, how do you put up with him? What a spanner. But with Connie's help, we can rescue him. This time around, I'll show you how to select and group your creations and how to scope in and out of groups. Luckily, someone left behind a block for us to use. Remember how to repeat clone blocks to create a bridge? Well, let's do that again. move your view side-on to the block and the gap. Hold L1, then grab the block with R2. Move it with the motion sensor function to create a clone. Just like last time, let go of L1 while still holding R2, then press the directional buttons to make more clones. If you rotate the first block a little before you clone it, you can make an arch. Use L2 to make the first block angle up slightly, then make the clone angle down. Press the left directional button to repeat clone, and the clones will line up to make an arch. Amazing, right? Let's quickly test that in play mode. Looks great. Switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and go to the next step of the tutorial. Now, you probably noticed that all the blocks, the original as well as its clones, were selected automatically after cloning. You can tell when things are selected because they have an animated dashed outline. But after we switched between play and edit modes, everything was deselected. So let's select them again. All you have to do is hover your imp over one of the blocks and press X. There's the outline again. Now do the same to the rest until the whole bridge is selected. Can you see how each block has its own outline, with a double line where they meet? That's because they're still individual elements. You can deselect them one at a time with X, but it's much quicker if you deselect them all at once with circle. Give it a try. There's also a faster way of selecting multiple objects. Just select one as before, but this time keep X held down. Now move your imp to select the others. Better than selecting one at a time, right? So much faster. The great thing about having multiple objects selected is that you can manipulate them as if they were one object. For example, if all the blocks are selected, you can clone the bridge sideways to create a double bridge. Plenty of room for Connie to cross it without falling off the edge. Try it in play mode. Once Connie is across the gap, go back to edit mode and move on to the next step. You know, this bridge would be really useful to help Connie cross to the next platform. Use X to select all the blocks again. If we're going to use this bridge a lot, we can make it into a group. That way, it will behave like a single element and you won't have to keep selecting all the blocks. Have you noticed the menu at the side of the screen? It appears when you have one or more objects selected. That's the context menu. The options it gives you will depend on the situation you're in. In this case, all the buttons relate to selected objects. Look for the plus sign. That's the icon for the group button. The number next to it tells you how many objects you've selected. You can use this button now to turn all of those blocks into a group. There we go. The bridge is now a single element. You can tell because it has one outline around it instead of one around each block. And if you look over at the context menu, you'll see the group button now says ungroup. Use it if you want to break a group up. But we still need it to help Connie. So let's clone this bridge and place it between the second and third platforms. Just like before, hold L1 and grab the bridge with R2 to clone it. As always, remember to let go of L1. Ah, we don't need to test the bridge to see that it's not going to get Connie to the third platform. But don't worry, we'll fix that in the next step when you're ready to move on. Our bridge needs a bit of work if it's going to reach the next platform. This is the perfect opportunity to learn a new technique, scoping in. Scoping in means you can jump into a group and edit the contents individually without having to ungroup it first. And since you can only edit things inside the group, you don't have to worry about messing up anything outside it. Let's give it a try now. Select the bridge with X if it isn't already selected. Then find the Scope In button near the bottom of the context menu. Notice that it's showing you a shortcut for it, L1 and X. So hover over the bridge group, hold L1 and press X. Now you're scoped in. We can now edit all the parts as if it wasn't a group. If you want to really focus on just the group, you can hide everything else in the scene. Just use the Hide Everything Else button in the context menu. The icon looks like a closed die. There's also... That's it. Now scope back in again so we can fix the bridge. Just hop to create a new one. Once you've built the staircase, test it out in play mode to make sure Connie can make it across. When you're happy with it, switch back to edit mode, rewind time, and move on to the final step of this tutorial. Is your staircase working? Fantastic. Now Connie just needs a bit more help to save poor old Cuthbert from his predicament. Luckily, you can clone your staircase group to reach the final platform. Use the clone shortcut L1 and R2 to copy the staircase group to the last platform. Don't forget to let go of L1 once the clone has been created. That's how useful groups are. If you select the group, you'll see a button in the context menu that saves the group as a new element. Saving a group as a new element means you can use it in other scenes or share it in the Dreamiverse. Are you ready to get those creative juices flowing? This tutorial's all about making your creations beautiful. Now, this is Connie's front garden. But what's this? It's had all the colour, style and magic sucked out of it. But not to worry, Connie. We can help make the garden pretty again with the power of dreams. Just to start you off, all the lighting's already done. We can learn more about that later. And because I'm ever your servant, I've also grouped some of these objects just for you. It'll make editing them quicker and easier. So what does the garden need? Well, it could do with some colour, texture, and movement. Luckily, the coat, style, and effects modes are the perfect tools to do that. They don't create new objects, they modify existing sculptures and paintings. And they work on groups. With just a little practice, you can become a master of them all. So let's start by adding some colour with the tint tool. Open the assembly menu with the square button and go to the modes menu. Each mode has its own set of tools and options. The tint tool is in coat mode. It has an icon that looks like a pot of paint being spilled. Select it by pressing the X button. As you can see, the assembly menu has now been replaced with the coat menu. In the top row, you'll find options and helpers. Along the bottom, you'll find the tools. Now, which colour to use? Open the Colours menu in the top row of icons. These are colour groups. You can expand a colour group with X. Each group contains more shades that you can choose from. I'm going to find a green for the foliage, but if green's not your thing, you can experiment. Is the menu too long? You can scroll it by grabbing it with R2. Pick a shade, or if you fancy a more painterly or organic look, choose the tumbler colour at the end of the group. That will apply a random shade that changes as you work. When you've chosen a colour, you're ready to go to the next step. To add colour to our scene, we'll use the Tint tool, which has an icon like an airbrush. You can manually select it in the Tools menu. But in Coat mode, choosing a colour from the Colours menu equips the Tint tool automatically. See the airbrush icon on the tip of your imp. The Tint tool recolours objects, either tinting or completely covering their original colour. Just press and hold R2 to tint the objects at the tip of your imp. No need to select or scope into anything. The rounded clumps look a bit dreary in this scene. Let's add some colour. You can see that the longer you hold R2, the stronger the tint gets. And with a tumbler colour selected, it will cycle through different shades. If you make a mistake, you can undo using the left directional button. Or set your tool to subtract and you can detint. How do you do that? If you press triangle while the tool is active, your imp will change to an outline. So now it will remove tint instead of adding it. And that works on pretty much all of the coat, style, and effects tools. Just press triangle when they're equipped to make them subtractive. Try removing some colour using subtractive tint now. Just hold R2 over the object. And to make the tool additive again, press triangle. Now that you've got to grips with that, you can colour in the whole scene with the tint tool. Go wild! Use different colours to tint the path, rocks, river, grass, trees, and the little cottage. The Colours menu has all the colours you need. Just open a colour group and pick a shade, or the tumbler colour. Take some time to colour your scene. When you're done, move on to the next step. Good job. Wonderful. Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Wonderful. Good job. Now your scene is beautifully coloured in, let's add some texture to it. For that, we need to leave coat mode and go into style mode. To leave a mode, select the exit button in the top right of the screen. Or you can use a shortcut. Hold L1 and press circle. Just like scoping out of a group. Now use the Modes menu to switch over to Style mode. The Style mode icon is an S-shaped brushstroke. All sculptures and paintings in Dreams are made up of flecks, and Style mode is where we manipulate them. For example, notice how the objects in this scene look smooth. That's because their flecks are small and tightly packed together. We can make them more textured with the Looseness tool. Select the Looseness tool. It looks like a blurry circle. Now try using R2 to loosen some of the foliage in the scene. Don't hold back. As you can see, loosening sculptures and paintings means their flecks become more obvious. If you think they're getting too loose, press triangle to make the tool subtractive and tighten them up again with R2. Or you can just use the left directional button to undo. Don't forget to loosen up the river too. We'll need it in the following steps. Carry on loosening the objects in the scene. When you're happy, proceed to the next step. Wonderful. Connie's garden looks like a lovely painting. Let's look at the water now. Water has a reflective quality, so let's add some shine to the river. This is where the Finish tool comes in. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colours menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. Select it with X. Select it with X. Exit out of Style mode with L1 and circle and head back into Coat mode in the Modes menu. Next to the Colours menu in Coat mode, you'll find the Finishes menu. Select it with X. These finishes change the way objects react to light in your scene. Using finishes, you can make objects shiny, rough, metallic, or even translucent. Now you can choose your finish for the river. Let's see. Ah, yes. How about shiny wax? Wax finishes are translucent, and the shine will give the river a reflective surface that will catch the light. Apply the finishes before using R2. Remember that you can revert your changes by switching to subtractive mode with triangle or by using undo. Try editing the finish on other groups and objects in the scene. Continue to the next step when you're ready. Our river looks nice and shiny now, but something's missing. It doesn't flow like water does. But there's a magical tool for that in effects mode. It's called the flow tool. Leave coat mode if you haven't already, and enter effects mode. The effects mode icon has some twinkly stars on it. Alongside the flow tool, you'll notice other animated effects that you can apply to sculptures or paintings. But for now, we'll pick the flow tool. Its icon is a tap, or a faucet if you're from the US. Press X over the flow tool to select it, and use R2 to apply it to the river. Isn't that lovely? In effects mode, you can preview the flow effect even when time is paused. But if you leave effects mode, you'll need to click R3 to see the effects in action. When the river's flowing at the right speed, you may notice something a bit odd. It's flowing the wrong way. Let's fix that using another tool found in Style mode, the Comb tool. Leave effects mode using L1 and circle, then go back into Style mode via the Modes menu. The Comb tool icon is some wavy lines. Select it with X. Now we're going to make the river flow the correct way. How do we do that? You guessed it. Hold R2 to comb the flecks of the river so they go in the right direction. We're no longer in effects mode, so we can't see the flow effect animating. But just click R3 to start time, and you'll be able to see it again. The key is to move your imp in the direction you'd like the flecks to flow. A bit like you're combing the river's hair. Very stylish. Let go of R2 when you're happy with the flow direction. And now you can see the river is going the correct way. But if it isn't, just undo and try again. When you're happy with the speed and direction of the river, click L3 to rewind time. Then it's off to the next step. This scene is really coming together. Next, let's do something interesting with the chimney smoke. Move closer to the smoke so you can see the flecks clearly. These flecks don't look very smoky, do they? Let's change that. If you're not already in Style mode, head there now using the Modes menu. Open the Flex menu with X. It's the button in the center of the top row. Now choose a fleck that looks smoky. How about the dots fleck? When you choose a fleck type, it'll automatically select the Apply Fleck tool. Now, hover your imp over the smoke and hold R2. The flecks will change. That's better. Let's inspect it now using the grab cam. Grab it with R1. And while you're grabbing, spin around it with the left or right stick. The paint strokes look a bit flat, don't they? You can only see them well from certain angles. We can make it a bit more billowy and three-dimensional using the Impasto tool. In the Style menu, select the Impasto tool, then hold R2 to apply it to the smoke. Watch as the individual flecks of the painting become more three-dimensional. To see it better, use the grab cam to spin around the smoke again. You can also press undo and redo to compare the smoke with and without Impasto. Now that you've mastered Impasto, the last style tool we're going to use is the Ruffle tool. The Ruffle tool icon looks like a lot of lines going in different directions. It will randomly rotate the flecks so they're not as orderly. It works in the same way as the other two tools. Select it with X, then use R2 to apply it. And switch the tool to subtractive by pressing triangle. Ruffle makes quite a difference, doesn't it? Why not see if you can animate the smoke using the flow tool in effects mode? When you're happy, go to the next step of the tutorial. Now that the scene is looking good, we should make Connie's cottage look more welcoming for her. We can do that using something called the glow tool. So head back to the modes menu and into coat mode. The glow tool has an icon that looks like a little sun. Select it with X, then move your view over to the cottage for a closer look. Now position your view so that you can see the door and the window and into coat mode. The glow tool has a... Now that we can do that using something called the glow tool. So head back to the modes menu and into coat mode. The glow tool has an icon that looks like a little sun. Select it with X, then move your view over to the cottage for a closer look. Now position your view so that you can see the door and the window of the cottage. Then hold R2 over the window in the door to make it glow. Go on, give it some welly. Whoa, that's too bright. Let's press triangle to make the tool subtractive, then use R2 to reduce the glow. Maybe you could try tinting the window to change the color of the light. See what you think. Have a play with the glow tool, and then move on to the next step when you're ready. The scene looks so alive now, and Connie's in love with her new home. It's hard to believe that this scene used to be all grey and blocky. Let's try something. How different did we actually make it? To see, we can use a special trick. Press square to open the menu, and then take a look in the Show Hide section. The Show Hide icon looks like an open eye. It can be found in most of the modes menus. In the Show Hide menu, you can make all sorts of different objects visible or invisible. It only works in edit mode, so your scene will still look the same in play mode. Some of them are on by default, and some are switched off. Coat, Style and Effects is one of the options which is on by default. Its icon is a combination of the icons for all three of those modes. Try turning it off by pressing X over it. Wow, what an amazing difference. That shows you how powerful these tools really are. Using Coat, Style and Effects, you can make even the most boring block come alive. Practice using the tools and see what you can come up with. When you're finished, go to play mode in the options menu and walk Connie into her beautiful new home. This will complete the tutorial. looks like Cuthbert is in a spot of bother. Connie needs our help to get across these platforms so she can rescue Cuthbert. So how about we add a little handmade animation to get her there? You don't need to go into play mode to see that Connie won't be able to make this jump. So let's animate that floating ledge down to her using an action recorder. Action recorders are super easy to use. Just stamp one in your scene, and it will record anything you move with the imp. And we mean anything. It'll even record you moving or tweaking gadgets. We'd better get going. Connie's getting really impatient. You know what cones are like. Go to the assembly menu. Press a square button if it's not already open. Then head to the animate menu. The animate icon is a clapperboard, that thing they use in movies before the director says, action. Now you get to be the director, and you can use these tools and gadgets to animate objects. Select the action recorder, the icon with a film strip and a plus sign on it. You'll now have an action recorder gadget on your imp. Stamp it down, somewhere near the floating ledge. A progress bar will appear at the top of the screen, along with a record button on the right. Also, your imp will turn red. This means you're ready to start recording. Don't worry, recording won't start until you begin moving or changing things. When you're ready, grab the floating ledge with R2. Move it slowly towards Connie using the motion sensor function or the sticks. You'll notice that the bar starts to fill, recording your every move. Don't worry, it's not a time limit. The bar fills up as a visual indicator of something being recorded, so take your time. When you let go of R2, the recording will pause. If you move your view or use the grab cam, that won't be recorded. But if you've started time with R3, recording will continue when you let go of R2. That's why it's important to rewind or pause time before recording anything. That way, your action recorder only contains what you put into it. When you've finished recording, select the Stop Recording button in the context menu. Or you can use the shortcut L1 and circle button to exit the action recorder. Your imp will go back to normal to show that recording has stopped. Click R3 to play back your animation. Handmade animations are always a bit wobbly, but practice makes perfect. Calibrating your imp can help when using the motion sensor function. Just hold your controller in a comfortable position, then hold the Options button for a few seconds. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit a recorded animation. anything you record is stored in the Action Recorder gadget. If you hover over the floating ledge, the Action Recorder will pulse. Select the Action Recorder with X, and dashed lines will appear on the objects animated with it. It'll also show the animation path. That's this dashed line. If you're not happy with your animation, redoing it is easy. First, rewind time with L3. Another way to edit animations is to tweak them. Hold L1 and press the square button over the Action Recorder gadget to open its Tweak menu. Here you can see all the tweaks for the Action Recorder. By default, the playback mode is set to loop, so it plays the animation over and over again. But you can set them to play once, sustain, or to ping-pong. Once will play the whole animation just one time. Sustain will play the animation for as long as the Action Recorder has power. If it loses power, it will stop. Then it will continue from that point when it's powered again. Ping-pong plays the animation forward once, and then plays it in reverse. Then forward, then backwards, and so on. That sounds like a good option for our floating ledge. Select ping-pong with X. Click R3 to start time and play the animation. You can also change the animation speed to make it slower or faster. Grab the slider with X and use your Imp to change the speed. If you want to explore more of the Action Recorder tweaks, you can. If you hover over any button for a few seconds, a more info tip will explain what that tweak does. To close the tweak menu, just hold L1 and press the circle button anywhere over it. And of course, you can undo any changes you make by pressing the left directional button. Switch to play mode to test your changes. When you're ready, come back to edit mode and start the next step. Now that Connie's made it up to the higher platform, how will she get back down to the next one? First, rewind time with L3. You probably already know about cloning objects, but do you know that you can clone their animations along with them? I'm sure you remember how to clone, but if not, just hold L1 and grab the ledge you animated with R2. Once you've made the clone, release L1, then move the ledge to the other side and release R2 to place it. Now let's get Connie to Cuthbert and get them through the door. I've placed a shiny helper cube. Let's call it Cuthbot. That holds up the next platform, but it's not very animated at the moment. To get it to walk back and forth towards the exit, we need to use Record Possession. It allows you to possess puppets and record a performance with them. Open the Assembly menu, then go to the Animate menu. Select Record Possession. It's the button with the sock puppet icon. Your imp at a 3-second To get it to walk back and forth towards the exit, we need to use Record Possession. It allows you to possess puppets and record a performance with them. Open the Assembly menu, then go to the Animate menu. Select Record Possession. It's the button with the sock puppet icon. Your imp can now possess the puppets in the scene. In the context menu, you'll see the count-in button. When this is selected, you'll get a 3-second count-in before recording starts. Press R2 over the cuffbot to possess the puppet and start the countdown. When the count reaches 0, the possession recorder... You may have noticed a possession recorder gadget has appeared next to the cuffbot. When you're using Record Possession, this gadget appears the moment you press the Stop Recording button. Select it with X to view the animation path. The Possession Recorder gadget also lets you edit and tweak the animation. Hold L1 and press X over the Possession Recorder to scope in and edit it. Just like the Action Recorder, you can choose to retake the animation by selecting the button in the context menu. To stop editing the Possession Recorder, select Stop Recording in the context menu. Or hold L1 and press the circle button to quickly scope out. You can also tweak the Possession Recorder with L1 and the square button. It has exactly the same options as the Action Recorder. Experiment with the recorder and the different tweak options. Remember, you can see more info about the tweak settings by hovering over them for a few seconds. Close the tweak menu by pressing L1 and the circle button anywhere over it. Once you're done editing, switch over to play mode to test out the completed scene. Then Connie can navigate to the last platform and help Cuthbert through the door to complete the tutorial. In this tutorial, you're going to learn all about the exciting world of logic. Pay no attention to Cuthbert. It's not as complicated as it sounds. I promise. Let's check out the scene. See the buttons on the platforms in front of our good friend Connie? They activate the bridges that will take her to the next platform. At least that's what they're supposed to do. To get them working, you'll need to connect them to the gadgets that control them. You can't see gadgets when you're in play mode, but they let you do all sorts of useful things in edit mode. You can tell gadgets apart by their color and icons. Green gadgets are sensors and inputs. This one is what we call a trigger zone. It's one of the more versatile gadgets. It can trigger other gadgets when it detects something in the scene. Like in this case, Connie standing on the button. Hi, Connie. If you select the gadget with X, before we start connecting things, make sure you can see both gadgets. You'll notice they have ports sticking out of their sides. Ports on the left are inputs, and the ones on the right are outputs. Hover over the output port on the trigger zone now. You'll see the word detected appear. That means that when the trigger zone detects something, this output will send a signal. Before it can send that signal to the rotator, though, we'll need to connect them with a wire. So hover over the detected output and press R2 or X. You'll notice your Imp is now tethered to the port by a wire. Power ports have appeared on the gadgets too. It's these ports that switch gadgets on or off. Now that we've connected the rotator, let's take a look at the second platform. See the yellow gadget on its side? This gadget isn't a sensor or an output. It's called a microchip. Microchips are used to organize logic in scenes. You can think of them as boxes of gadgets and wires. Let's have a look inside. Hover over this one with your Imp. Hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group of objects. This window is the microchip's canvas. And if these gadgets look familiar, it's because they're two rotators. Each one controls half of this jointed drawbridge. Try to connect the output from the trigger zone to the power ports on the rotators. You can create multiple wires from the same output. Or you can clone wires in the scene by holding L1, then grabbing them with R2. Clone the wire near the rotator to create a new wire from the trigger zone. Once you've connected the trigger zone to the second rotator, switch over to play mode and make sure it's all working. OK, jumping on the button now will activate the trigger zone and raise the drawbridge so that you can cross over the... Oh, wait a minute. The bridge has dropped down before Connie could cross. That's because the signal to the rotator stopped sending as soon as Connie stepped off the trigger zone. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. In the next step, I'll show you how to make signals stay on. If we want the bridge to stay up, we'll need to add a gadget between the trigger zone and the rotator to keep it activated. We can do this with a counter. So let's go into the assembly menu. Press square to open it if it's closed. Select the gadgets menu with X. You'll find the counter in the logic and processing section. The gadgets in this menu take an input signal and change it in some way before sending it on. Go ahead and select the counter. Its icon is a tally counter. Now you can see the gadget on your Imp. Hover over the microchip and it will snap to the canvas. Press R2 or X to stamp the counter onto the microchip, then press circle to unequip it. The counter gadget counts up or down whenever it receives a signal through its inputs. By default, it starts its count at 0 and has a target of 1. Once it reaches that target, it sends a constant signal through its counter-full output port. Before we connect it though, let's tidy up the wires connecting the trigger zone to the rotators. Just hover over them and press triangle to delete them. Now press R2 or X over the detected output of the trigger zone to create a new wire. Connect it to the increase count input port on the counter. And, this is the important part, it will stay at 1. Hover over the counter-full output port of the counter. This port sends a signal when the counter reaches its target. Create a wire with R2 or X and connect it to one of the rotator's power ports. Then do the same for the other one. Time to switch to play mode and try out our new connection. When you're happy everything's working as it should, return to edit mode and move on to the next step. Just one more bridge for Connie to cross. As you can see, we have another microchip on the platform, so let's open it up. Hover over it with your Imp, hold L1 and press X. Okay, looks like we have everything we need here. But Connie's an adventurer, so how about we make this last bridge more challenging? Adding a timer to the logic should get the adrenaline going. Once Connie activates the button, she'll only have a few seconds to cross before the bridge drops back down. Let's head back to the assembly menu. If it isn't already open, press square. Then go into the gadgets section. You'll find the timer in the same place as the counter, the logic and processing section. Its button has a clock face on it. Now go ahead and stamp the timer gadget onto the microchip with R2 or X. Then unequip it from your Imp with the circle button. Now let's take a closer look at the timer's inputs and outputs. You can see their names by hovering over the ports. The first input is a start timer port. Once this receives a signal, it will start the clock. The second one is reset timer, which sets the time back to 0. Over on the output side, we have timer finished and timer output. Timer finished sends a signal when the timer reaches the required number. It's set to 5 seconds by default. Timer output is a little more sophisticated. The signal it sends represents the timer's current progress. If, let's say, it's only halfway to its target, the signal it sends will be half strength. So how do we connect this so the bridge only stays up for a few seconds? Well, we need the bridge to be raised while the timer is running. So create a wire on the timer output with R2 or X. Remember how we used the counter on the previous platform? We can use one here too. Just like before, connect the wire to the counter's increase count input. Then connect the counter full output to the rotator's power port. Time to see if it works. Click R3 to test it out. As you can see, since the timer isn't connected to a trigger yet, the clock starts ticking as soon as we play the scene. The bridge goes up, but doesn't drop down when the timer finishes. That can only mean one thing. There's a problem with the logic. If you'd like to figure it out for yourself, feel free to check the gadgets and see what's wrong. Or move on to the next step and we'll go through it together. Remembering that it'll put the to which and count input. But we also need to reset the timer, otherwise the logic will only work once. So let's get another wire from the timer finished output and connect this one to the reset timer input. You'll recognize it by the rewind symbol on it. All we have left to do is to connect the trigger zone to the start timer port so Connie can activate it. Okay, that was a lot of connections. So before we test it out, let's go over the logic we've made. First, Connie activates the trigger zone, which sends a signal to start the timer. Once the clock starts running, the timer output becomes active. This tells the counter to count up. That then turns on the rotator and raises the bridge. So, on the third platform, we've set up a timer that makes the bridge drop after 5 seconds. But I think that might be too easy for a seasoned pro like Connie. Let's make it a little bit more challenging. First, if you're in play mode, switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Let's move in closer to the microchip with the timer. You can use the grab cam, R1, to move your view. Now I'll show you how to tweak a gadget's settings. Hover over the timer gadget, hold L1 and press square. This tweak menu contains the settings for the timer. hover over the sliders and buttons to see their names. The top slider sets the target time for the timer. If we lower this setting, the bridge will stay up for a shorter time. To adjust the value, hover your imp over the slider, then hold X. Use your imp to drag the slider left or right. Set it to around 3 seconds. It doesn't have to be exact. If you're a stickler for precision, you can adjust the slider incrementally using the up and down directional buttons. Just hover your imp over the slider and press up or down to tweak the value. In fact, why don't we make things really interesting for Connie? Let's set it to 2.5 seconds. You can close the tweak menu now by selecting the cross in the top corner with X. Or you could use a shortcut. Just hold L1, then press circle while hovering over the menu to close it quickly. The same shortcut works for closing microchips. Give it a try now. Hold L1, then hover your imp over the... So, on the third platform, we've set up a time...
Hi, I'm Mark, Creative Director of Media Molecule, and I'm going to present a simple masterclass that will hopefully help you use some of what you've learned so far and turn that into an entire game. I'm going to be focusing on a remix of the Dreamiverse Dash game. That means take a copy of something, mess around with it, which is always a really good way to learn. I will be reiterating some of the basics that you may have already learnt, but basics make for strong foundations, and strong foundations make for strong structures. Yes. So, first of all, try playing the game, get familiar with it, and when you get past the finish line, we'll dive in and start tinkering. Okay, let's start by making sure we feel comfortable navigating the space. So here's a quick reminder of how we do this. If you feel you're already a master at camera controls, then you can skip this step. Use the Okay, you should be confident about moving around with camera controls now. So let's start changing the actual scene. Before we do that though, you may have noticed lots of these little bright cubes scattered around. These are gadgets. We don't need to see them for now, so let's hide them. Go to the menu, find the Show Hide button, and make sure electronics are turned off. That'll make things a bit clearer. Okay, let's start changing the track layout. In this step, I'll be talking about deleting, moving, and cloning. If you feel you're already a master of these techniques, then feel free to skip this step. Hello again. I know some of you out there like to be all neat and tidy, line things up, keep things at right angles, etc. If this is you, then you can use the various guides to make you feel less itchy. Grid Snap is most useful for this. Look in the menu under Guides. Turn on Grid Snap with X, and then you can make the grid coarser or finer. Now, when you move an object, you'll see that it snaps to a grid. So, let's add some new objects to the scene without using the clone tool. If you can't see your menu, remember to press the square button to make it appear. For some new objects, we'll need to go and search the Dreamiverse. Do that by clicking this button on the assembly menu. You can go looking for whatever you want, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll stick to the Dreamiverse collection. So make sure you're in there. Go in and choose a bounce pad with X. You can now stamp some objects into the scene using either X or R2, whichever you prefer. Let's turn on Obey Auto Guides, so it's easier to put these things on the floor. Go to the menu, select Guides, then Obey Auto Guides. Let's get another object, a balloon. Now, make sure all the guides are off and stamp a balloon in the air. Before I stamp it though, note that I can rotate it using the touchpad. Just slide your finger on the touchpad in different directions to rotate it. While we're on the subject of rotating, let me show some other ways to do this. Try grabbing something by holding R2, then use the touchpad to rotate it, just like we did before we stamped the balloon. Another way is to grab and hold with L2 instead of R2. You can now rotate the object using the motion sensor by physically rotating your controller. Note that it rotates around the point you grabbed with the imp tip. And finally, using the L2 grab method, you can also use the left and right sticks to rotate. If you rotate using the left and right sticks like this, the gyro method, by which I mean using the motion sensor, will be disabled until you re-grab. So go ahead, try putting some new elements into the scene. Once you're comfortable with this, you know all you need to know to go off and put some new scenes together. Go to DreamShaping, start a new game scene, and use other people's objects and characters you find in the Dreamiverse. This will get you a long way. If you feel like learning some more though, stick around and hit next when ready. So, by now you know how to build a scene from scratch. But let's explore a really quick and easy way to add some movement and bring your scenes to life. Let's animate a part of the track using Dream's very own special version of motion capture. Make sure time is paused and that you have rewound the scene. First off, find something you feel could do with a bit of movement in it. Then grab it with R2 and practice the movement you'd like it to do. Remember, you can use the left directional button to undo if you accidentally leave it in an odd place. Don't be too precious right now. We'll learn how to be more precise later on. Let's just get something moving to learn the principle. Okay, when you feel you've got a good idea of what movement you're going to do, open the menu with the Hello again. Let's get a bit deeper now. Assuming you haven't gone triangle button mad and deleted everything in the scene, there will be some objects in there that you can modify in ways other than just deleting them or moving them. Let's find one of these bounce pads, for example. Let's turn on electronics, as we want to look at those now. If they aren't already visible, then go to the Show Hide on the menu and make sure electronics are turned on. Notice if you hover over the object you animated, you will see the path that it follows. and the gadget the animation is in will throb. You can delete the gadget with the triangle button if you want, or leave it. It's up to you. Position your Imp's tip over the object and select it with X. You'll then see these contextual buttons appear. This bounce pad isn't actually a single object. It's a few objects that have been grouped together. But we can go into this group to mess around with the individual members of it, much like going into a folder on a computer. Press this button to scope into the group. You'll notice everything else go grey and blurred, except the things in the group. Yes, some of these things are still colourful. They're a special case, which we'll ignore for now. Pressing the Hide Everything Else button will make it super clear what is in this group, as it will hide everything else. We are now scoped into this bounce pad, and you'll notice that a gadget has appeared, which was invisible before. Gadgets will hide themselves unless you are in the same scope as them. There are exceptions to this, but we don't need to concern ourselves with those right now. So, you can go back or leave this scope by pressing this button in the corner. You can also use a shortcut to scope in and out. Hover over the object, hold L1 and tap X. This will take us in. Holding L1 and tapping circle button will take us out. In, out, in, out. Shake it all about. So, make sure you are in the bounce pad scope. You should see this gadget, a microchip. You can recognise a microchip by this little symbol. We can look inside the guts of a microchip by either selecting it with X and using the Open Microchip button, or by holding L1 and tapping X. This will tunnel us into the microchip and reveal some of its inner workings on its circuit board. It's possible you may be looking at the back of the circuit board when you first open it. If that happens, then simply move your camera to look at it from a better position. Or you can also use the L1 plus R1 trick on the circuit board to quickly zip to a better viewing position. We won't concern ourselves right now with everything on this circuit board. Let's just try changing the value on this slider using X. This will affect how high the bounce pad sends the character. Try ramping it up, and then switch to play mode to try it out. Remember, you've only changed one bounce pad though, not all of them, so try to remember which one you changed. Come back into edit mode and locate the bounce pad microchip that you left open. You can close a circuit board by pressing this little button in the corner, or by hovering the Imp tip over the board itself and pressing the L1 and circle button shortcut. But feel free to leave it open if you wish. You can happily scope out of the bounce pad, but leave the circuit board open. You won't need to scope in now to change the slider, but once closed, you'll have to scope in again to see the microchip and open it up. Lots of the items in this scene have a circuit board with a slider or two on them. So hunt around the scene, scope in, find them, experiment. Come back when you feel ready to learn some more. Did you come across any camera pointers or trigger zones in your explorations yet? No? Then let's find one. There should be one right near the start gate. Assuming you haven't deleted them all, they look like this. This is a trigger zone, and this is a camera pointer. Notice that when you hover your imp tip over either of these gadgets, a wire will appear. This shows us that they're connected to each other. A trigger zone is a way of saying, when something enters a certain area, do something. In this case, the trigger zone activates the camera pointer. When the cone character is in the trigger zone, a camera pointer will force the camera to look in a defined direction. If you select the trigger zone with the X button, then you'll see the area that it cares about. You might need to zoom out a bit to see it fully. If you position your imp tip over the green zone, you'll see that arrows appear. These show us that we can change the dimensions of the area. Just hold down R2 and drag. Press the circle button to deselect the trigger zone. There is another way to change the parameters of a trigger zone that gives you more control, but I'll save that for another time. We'll keep it simple for now. If you now select the camera pointer, you'll see some arrows appear. These show you the way the gadget wants to make the camera look. If you grab the camera pointer gadget by holding L2 instead of R2, you'll be able to change the defined angle. Use either the sticks or motion sensor. Let's look over here, and we'll see a trigger zone that has multiple wires coming off it. We can trace these wires to see what they are connected to. Handy little tip. If you use the L1 plus R1 trick on a wire, it'll take you to the other end of it. Very handy. We can see that we are connected to this large microchip. We'll take a look in there later. The other two wires are connected to camera pointers. If there's more than one camera pointer connected to a trigger zone, then the camera will blend between the two defined angles, based on how close the character is to each one. It's also worth noting, if you have a camera pointer in a scene that isn't connected to a trigger zone, then it will be on all the time and take away a player's ability to manually control the camera angle. When you feel you've understood trigger zones and camera pointers, why not try adding your own somewhere? You'll find the bits you need under Gadgets in the menu. Trigger zones live in Sensors and Input. And camera pointers live in Cameras and Lighting. Simply stamp them into the scene and connect them like so. Grab this little port with X or R2 and connect it to the power port on the camera pointer. Have a little play, and when you feel you've got it, we can move on to the next step. Port with X or R2. Camera pointers live in Cameras and Lighting. Simply stamp them into the scene and connect them like so. Grab this little port with X or R2. Camera pointers live in Cameras and Lighting. simply stamp them into the scene and connect them like so. Grab this little port with X or R2 and connect it to the power port on the camera pointer. Have a little play, and when you feel you've got it, we can move on to the next step. Okay, let's start messing around with some other stuff. First of all, if you haven't already found it, find the big microchip labelled Level Logic. You see this little symbol down here? Remember, this tells us that this is indeed a microchip and has some exciting stuff inside to look at. To take a look inside, we can select it and press the Open Microchip button, or hover over it with your Imp tip, hold L1 and press X. This will reveal the guts of the microchip. Don't be put off by the word microchip, by the way. It's just like a cupboard. You can put stuff in it and it helps to keep things neat and tidy. You can close it again by clicking the close icon or by holding L1 and pressing the circle button, either on the chip itself or on the revealed circuit board. So let's take a look at what this microchip contains. First of all, we have a sun and sky gadget. This will let us change some parameters regarding the sun and sky. So let's do that. But first, remember how I said microchips have this symbol on the corner, like this? Well, we can see the sun and sky gadget, which looks very similar to a microchip, doesn't have the symbol. This isn't like a cupboard. This is more like a cup in a cupboard. Are you keeping up with me? Feel free to go and get a cup of tea. It's pretty simple. There are microchips and gadgets. Microchips have this little symbol, gadgets don't. Why am I going on about this, I hear you say? Well, to get inside a microchip, as I've already said, we can use the L1 and X shortcut. But to see what delights a gadget has to offer, we use a different shortcut. We use L1 and square button, often referred to as tweaking. Or, of course, you can simply select it and use the tweak button on the context menu. Why not use the same button for opening a microchip and a gadget, I hear you say? Good question. I'm going to answer that. Microchips can be both opened up and tweaked. If you use the tweak shortcut on a microchip, L1 and square remember, then you'll get the microchip's tweak menu, not its circuit board. On a microchip's tweak menu, you can change its colour and the icon it displays, amongst other things. You'll care more about this when you start making your own microchips, but for now we'll just close this. I thought it was worth showing you, as it's inevitable you'll accidentally open a chip's tweak menu when you meant to open its circuit board. But no need to worry, you'll soon get used to it. So, anyway, let's tweak this sun and sky gadget. L1 plus square button. Notice that if I move the camera around, the tweak menu will follow me. This is their default behaviour. If you prefer it not to do that, then simply press this little button here, and it will sit in the world. This tweak menu has 2 pages. First page controls the sun brightness and colour, etc. But let's look on the second page. Select this tab by pressing the X button with the Imp tip. By holding down the X button and dragging these sliders, you can change the colour and brightness of the sky. I can grab the whole menu by holding down R2 if I want to move it to see more clearly. Remember, X button to change something on a tweak menu, R2 to grab and move the whole menu. Let's change a few sliders and see what happens. Now, let's take a look at this grade and effects gadget. These apply effects and colours to the whole screen. Have a little muck around, test it out in play mode, and if you're feeling really ambitious, why not try hooking up a trigger zone to a grade or sky gadget and see what happens? Note that if you have more than one grade or sky gadget in a scene, and they are active at the same time, they will average out their settings with the other gadgets of the same type. When you're ready, come back for the final step in this masterclass. So let's finish up by looking in this gadget here, Global Settings. Remember, L1 plus square button to get at its tweak menu. We can use this to set how strong gravity is in the scene, for example. Be sure to tick this button on or it will ignore the setting. As for the rest of the stuff in here, feel free to take a look inside. I won't go into detail, we've covered enough for one tutorial, but just to give you an overview, let's skim over them. This chip handles a firework display at the end of a race. This one hides the finish gate until you're halfway around the track, to stop players cheating. But you could solve that with careful scene design, or simply not having a looping track, for example. This chip handles the music, and it's a rather fancy way of doing things. It does different things depending on whereabouts in the race you are, but you can just stamp a simple piece of music into the scene if you like, job done. Or have no music at all, of course. This chip here puts up some simple text instructions. And finally, some more audio stuff. A simple mixer. Again, you don't need to use any of this stuff, but in future, as you get more professional about things, you may really want to. So, that wraps up this masterclass. I hope it's taught you something useful. You now know everything you need to start making new scenes. Why not go and try making a new game scene from scratch in DreamShaping? Find some objects and a character, maybe a piece of music, and publish it. Go on, I dare you.
There's nothing quite like sculpting something from scratch. But you'll need a good grasp of the tools to avoid coming unstuck. So let's get down to it. Maybe Cuthbert will learn something too. Go to the Assembly menu. Press the square button to open it if it's closed, and select the Modes menu with the X button. Select Sculpt Mode with X. Its icon has some 3D shapes on it. Every time you enter Sculpt Mode from the Modes menu, a new sculpture will be created. You'll also notice that when you're in Sculpt Mode, everything outside the sculpture will be blurred and greyed out. This is to help you focus on what you're creating. You can adjust visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the Options menu. When you first enter Sculpt Mode, the Shapes menu will open automatically and the Smear Shape tool will be equipped to your imp. Try smearing a shape now by holding R2 and moving your imp around. Now that's out of your system, undo all of it by using the left directional button. By using this tool, we'll help Connie get across the first gap. Move your view a bit closer to the action, looking side on at the space between the platforms. Make sure you can see the platforms and that your imp can reach them. We want to build an organic structure for Connie to walk on, so let's pick an appropriate shape. Select one from the Shapes menu, and you'll see it on the end of your imp. Use the up and down directional buttons to scale it to an appropriate size. While you have a shape on your imp, you can use the grab cam to zoom in and out. Just hold R1 and use the left stick. Now position your imp next to the platform on one side of the gap. Then hold down R2 and use the motion sensor function or the left stick to smear your shape in the gap so that Connie can walk on it. If you want to have another go at it, just undo using the left directional button. Feel free to press and let go of R2 as many times as you want. Each press will create a new edit within your sculpture. Bear in mind that all the edits you make are part of a single sculpture, even if they aren't connected. This means that in assembly mode, they'll behave like a single object. Why not try out different shapes to see what works best? Try holding L2 as you sculpt and use the left and right sticks to rotate the shape. Maybe try making something like a rock formation or a tree trunk. The cool thing is, sculptures are automatically physical, so they can be walked on by puppets like Connie immediately. When you want to try it out, switch to play mode in the options menu and get Connie to walk around on your sculpture. When you're happy to move on, go back to edit mode and proceed to the next step. What happens when we want to edit an existing sculpture rather than start a new one? Let's investigate. When we went into play mode, we were taken out of sculpt mode. When you're in assembly mode, scope back into your sculpture. Hover over it with your imp, hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group. Have a go at it now. Now we're here, let's try editing the shapes you've already made. To move or rotate shapes, unequip the Smear Shape tool by pressing circle. This automatically equips the Move tool. You might notice most of the movement controls in sculpt mode are the same as in assembly mode. Grab and move shapes with R2, rotate them using L2 and the sticks or the touchpad. You can hold L1 and move with R2 to clone your shapes or scale them with the up and down buttons. You can even repeat clone. But unlike assembly mode, you can't select things with X in sculpt mode. Now try moving, rotating, and scaling your individual shapes. If you want to smear some more shapes, just go to the Shapes menu and select a shape to sculpt with. Selecting a shape will automatically equip the last sculpting tool you used. Now you can play around at sculpting with different shapes. Don't forget that you can undo and redo at any time. If you accidentally scope out, you can scope back into your sculpture by hovering over it with your imp and pressing L1 and X. In the next step, I'll show you how to colour your sculpture. by hovering over it with your imp and pressing L1 and X. In the next step, I'll show you how to colour your sculpture. You've probably noticed by now that all your sculptures are orangey brown, like clay. That's the default colour, but you can sculpt with any colour you like. If you're in assembly mode, hover over your sculpture with your imp, then hold L1 and press X to scope back into it. Next, head to the Colours section in the Sculpt menu and press X over a colour group to see the different shades. Choose a colour, any one you like. And as if by magic, the shape on your imp is now the colour you chose. Any new shapes you make will be that colour, but the old shapes are still brown. Luckily, we can also colour shapes after we've created them, using the spray paint tool. Go to the Sculpt menu and open the Tools section with X. Then select the spray paint tool, which has a spray can icon. Now your imp will have an outline of the current shape on its tip. Intersect the shape with your sculpture and you'll see the spray paint colour appear on it. Hold R2 to apply the spray paint to the shapes. You can try out different colours and shapes to completely change the look of your sculpture. If you want to make it easier to keep your imp on the surface of the sculpture, you can use the Surface Snap guide. You can find Surface Snap in the Sculpt Guides menu. Select it with X to turn it on. There's a Guides menu in every mode, though not all guides are available everywhere. You can also change the finish of your sculpture using the Finishes menu. The Coat, Style and Effects tutorial has more on finishes if you're curious. By now, you should have an organic-looking form, and it'll be whatever colour your imagination conjured up. If you switched on Surface Snap, switch it off in the Guides menu before continuing. Just select the button with X to turn it off. Then, when you're ready, proceed to the next step. All these smeared shapes are creating one single sculpture, even if there's space between them. But you can also use the smear tool to remove from the sculpture instead of adding to it. To do that, we need to set the... Smearing shapes can be a messy business. Sometimes you just want to create neat sculptures. Luckily, there are ways to do that. So go to the Assembly menu and select Sculpt in the Modes menu. This will create a new sculpture. Now let's practice sculpting an architectural structure over the second gap. To help us build a neater bridge, open the Guides section of the Sculpt menu. In Guides, switch on Grid Snap by pressing X over it. You'll see a number appear next to the button. That's how big the grid squares will be. You'll notice the white dotted grid in the scene. The spacing of the dots shows the tightness of the grid. They will change orientation depending on your point of view. We'll leave it on the default setting for now. You can experiment with it later. Now try making a colourful sculpture using the Smear and Move tools and the Colours menu. This'll just be a practice one, so don't spend too long on it. We'll delete it and make an even better one in a minute. You'll notice that it's much easier to keep your shapes neat and straight this time. That's because Grid Snap is active. It makes your tools and objects snap to the grid. It also helps you rotate precisely. Try it out using L2 or the touchpad. With Grid Snap on, objects rotate 45 degrees at a time. You can rotate the shape on the end of your imp before you stamp it, or use the Move tool to rotate shapes that are already placed. When you're comfortable sculpting with Grid Snap, continue to the next step. If we want to make a super neat bridge, there's another guide we can use. If you're still in Sculpt mode, scope out of it with L1 and circle. Once you're in Assembly mode, delete your sculpture with triangle. Go to the Modes menu. Click the Sculpt Mode button to start a new sculpture. Now we're in Sculpt mode, the Guides menu will have different options. Open the Guides menu and switch on the Mirror Guide. Don't worry about the two additional options. Let's investigate them later. Also, check the Grid Snap is still turned on. Now select the Smear tool in your chosen colour and shape. The Mirror Guide will always centre on the first shape you make. That's why we started a new sculpture. Now, move your view so you can see all of the second gap, and your imp can reach it. If you need to, use the grab cam to zoom out a little from the shape on your imp. Now stamp your first shape right in the centre of the gap to enable the Mirror Guide. Then smear your shape from the centre over to the edge of the gap where it meets the platform. You'll see that your sculpt is mirrored, so you only have to make half of the bridge, and it'll be nice and symmetrical, leaving you to focus on making it fabulous. Carry on sculpting and carving your bridge until you're happy. Test it in play mode. And when Connie is over the second gap, return to edit mode via the options menu. When you're back in edit mode, switch off the mirror guide. You can also switch off grid snap if you want, before moving on to the next step. Now we need to create a bridge across the last gap. For that, we're going to use the mighty Stamp tool. First, we'll need to create a new sculpture by going to Sculpt mode via the Modes menu. Now that you're in Sculpt mode, make sure you've switched off the mirror guide before you continue. You'll be equipped with the Smear Shape tool by default, so you'll need to switch to the Stamp Shape tool. You can find Stamp Shape in the Sculpt mode Tools menu, next to Smear Shape. Its icon is a simple square. You can quickly switch between the Stamp and Smear tools using L1 and Triangle. Or you can set Stamp Shape to be your default sculpting tool in the My Preferences menu. That way, Stamp Shape will be automatically equipped when you start a new sculpture. Stamping shapes is a bit like stamping objects from the Dreamiverse. With the Stamp Shape tool, you only stamp one shape at a time, no matter how long you hold R2 or X. This has additional benefits too, which you'll see later. Now select the cube in the Shapes menu, then stamp one at the side of the gap. We're almost there, Connie! Open the Sculpt Tools menu again, and this time pick the Stretch tool. Its icon is a double-ended arrow. When Stretch is selected, hovering your imp over a shape will cause an arrow gizmo to appear. Hover over the side of the cube that's facing the opposite platform. Press and hold R2 when the arrow is showing, and use your imp to stretch the shape across the gap. Nice! Let go of R2. When Stretch is selected, hovering your imp over a shape will cause an arrow gizmo to appear. Hover over the side of the cube that's facing the opposite platform. Press and hold R2 when the arrow is showing, and use your imp to stretch the shape across the gap. Nice! Let go of R2 when you're done stretching. You can stretch any shape you've sculpted, It's not a very exciting bridge right now, but I've got something great to customize it with soon. Stretched. You can even stretch subtracted shapes, but only at the points where they intersect with the sculpture. Have some fun with the Stretch tool, but don't go to play mode just yet. When you're ready to take this bridge and your sculpting skills to the next level, continue to the final step. So far, I've shown you a few ways to edit the shapes you've already sculpted. But there's also a way to edit the shape before stamping or smearing. First of all, make sure you're still scoped into the sculpture. If not, hover over the bridge, hold L1 and press X to scope in. Also, make sure that you're using the stamp shape tool and not the smear shape. Next, choose a shape from the Shapes menu and select what color you want it to be. Now move the new shape right next to the bridge so that they're touching. Use the grab cam to make sure the shape is in contact with your bridge. Now hold L1 and press square to open the shape editor, just like when you want to tweak something. When you're in the shape editor, you can let go of L1 and the shape will be fixed in place while editing. Notice the Sculpt menu has been replaced with the Shape Editor menu. The buttons vary a little depending on which tool and shape you're using. The Shape Editor for the Stamp tool has quite a few options. We're only interested in one for now, the most exciting one: Soft Blend. The icon is the one with the two circles blending together. If the option isn't there, just check that you have the Stamp Shape tool equipped and not Smear Shape. This is important. Next to the icon, there's a slider and a toggle button. Sliders in the Shape Editor are round, which may seem unusual, but they work just like the sliders in tweak menus. The Blend Amount slider affects how much the shape will blend with other shapes nearby. Try holding X on the slider and moving your imp up and down. This is how you get some truly amazing shapes. The Hard Blend toggle switches between hard and soft blends. Toggle between the two options with X to see the difference it makes. To close the shape editor, just press Circle. Now have a play with your blendable shape. You can only blend shapes that are part of the same sculpture. So if you can't see any blending on your shape, scope into the sculpture with L1 and X. You can make some very cool shapes using blending. Try blending subtracted shapes too. Experiment with different shapes and blends on your bridge. Make it really fancy. You can jump back into the shape editor with L1 and square. You can use the shape editor in any of the sculpting tools. Try using soft blend with the spray paint tool. To exit the shape editor and return to sculpting, just press circle. When you've got the hang of the shape editor and you're happy with your bridge, try it out in play mode and get Connie to Cuthbert. Take Connie through the door to finish the tutorial.